Hey, welcome to the Elle Russ Show. My name is Elle Russ, and I am a #1 best-selling author and master coach. My intention is to inspire, educate, and motivate you with weekly content featuring amazing guests and solo episodes. Visit my website, elleruss.com, to learn more about me, my courses, free masterclasses, partner discounts, and much more. Enjoy the show. Susan Schwartz, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Well, your work and what you write about is something that, my gosh, I don't even know the statistics. You probably have it, but father issues with daughters, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I'd like to just talk with you about Jungian psychology, analytical psychology. Can you explain to people what that is and how that might differ from other areas of psychology that psychologists like you go ahead and explore and then get trained in?
Well, there's quite a difference, and the difference begins with honoring the unconscious. And so what that means is that if you're an analyst, you, of course, have to be analyzed yourself. So you go quite deeply into your own psychology, but that also means that you go deeply into the culture, your culture, other cultures, and what we all carry unconsciously. So the unconscious is accentuated. Also in the work, also what gets accentuated are dreams, synchronistic events, which means the meaningfulness of life. The bigger questions, what am I doing here? What does my symptom really mean beyond its surface meaning? And not how will I repair myself, but how am I going to become more completely who I am? Yeah, it's quite a package.
So that seems like such a holistic approach, right? Versus like, what's your problem? Let's target something specific. Is that sort of, I understand the difference between, is it more forward thinking and looking back versus just looking back? How would you?
Well, yes, you absolutely are on it. It is backward thinking, present thinking, and forward thinking. Because everything that we do, we're in the present. We're influenced by our past, and that is going to influence how we live our future. I think the point is to live it as fully as we can. So
why would psychologists, because what you're describing to me, right, and I'm not a psychologist, but what you're describing to me is this makes perfect holistic sense. So what would be, devil's advocate, reasons why psychologists wouldn't all go towards Jungian analytical psychology?
Well, that's a very good question.
Or like, what would their arguments be? I'm just curious to see, what the
I'll give you. Yes.
would be. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think their story would be that, I don't really know, but I think the story would be that the symptom is the only issue we're dealing with.
Gotcha.
So if you stop drinking, fine. But that isn't really...
No, because there's dry drunks. That doesn't make any sense. Really.
Well, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a fulfilled life just because you have stopped being OCD. And you don't just stop being OCD. You have become that way because of many reasons. You want to understand the reasons. And you also want to use those pieces that have gone off the rails to get back on the rails.
Let's dive into your work on the absent father effect on daughters. Boy, I know so many people listening and who are going to eventually hear this episode. This is important work because it is a thing and it does affect us. So I don't even know where to start with this. I'll let you decide.
Well, let me just say, one of the reasons why this came about was because of my work. And I would ask people, so what about your father? Because oftentimes people will talk about their mother and blame their mother because she was around. And then what about your father? Well, there's a blank. And then I would ask, well, what was he really like? And there would come the excuses. Well, he's kind of quiet. He wasn't around. He was working a lot. He gave us what he could. He did his best. All rationales for the pain of not having a father present, not just physically, emotionally as well. And culturally, it's not really a deal that fathers even need to be around or learn to be around emotionally because they didn't have fathers that were around either. So we have this transgenerational almost heritage, which I feel is important to name, to acknowledge, not blame, but grow from.
Well, and it's interesting. I was talking to, I'm 49. And so I have noted, and look, I mean, there's no, all generalizations are bad. I get it. But I have noticed that the guys my age who are dads are much better dads than the dads when I was young.
Yeah, that's right.
They are much better. My God, they are great. I just shout out to all the dads out there right now. I mean, the level of being able to have conversations that a father wouldn't even want to touch would run out of the room. And so I want to say and commend because I am impressed with what has changed over my lifetime so far.
I think, and you're absolutely right. It shows how much we learn, how much we grow from generation to generation, which is totally healthy because what else are we going to be doing but growing? And then we can say that the kids that they are raising hopefully will be even more present.
Right.
I would also say, though, that we carry inside of ourselves that absence. It's really in our culture. I'm glad you know so many men who know how to be present, but the issue of being really present as a person is not so easy. It's kind of a bigger issue, and we all kind of struggle with that. It's called, being mindful of how you are, or lots of different phrases. But I'm glad that you say that the men are really being much better fathers. And I think that is not the majority.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's still an issue there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the effects. I mean, I've spoken about it in my second book. My father, he essentially was just like completely was in the stock market, like lost all our money, blew it, became a drunk. And so my mother had to pick up the pieces. And from that, and I talk about this, we're at that moment. I remember I made a declaration, which later I had to really revisit because then I was attracting the pattern. So right. I made this declaration at the time where I was like, you know what? This is what happens. My mom married this nice guy, nice family. Everyone's educated, potential, finances. Oh, you don't have to work. You can support the kids. And then he loses everything and you can be left in the fucking dust. I'm not going to be that. I'm never going to rely on a man. I'm never going to, all that stuff. So I thought that was such an independent declaration, but I kept attracting people that continually proved the story true. Right. Until I did the fucking work. And wow. It was amazing because it was actually my cousin who pointed out to me, I was going through another one of these, blow up drama or whatever, a bad breakup situation. And my cousin goes, this doesn't happen to me or like any of my friends. I've dated many people over my life. Like, so why you? And that was probably the best thing she could have said to me because I was the common denominator there. And I did have to go back and look at that stuff. And I'm happy to say I completely turned it around and it is possible, but it's painful. And I remember I was reading a book and it was asking me questions and it had a line for mother, like, what did your mother give you? And it had the line for the father. And as I was reading the questions, I just started crying. It was like the first time I had to really go, damn, this guy, not blame, but this is why, and it's okay. But now I got to go do something about it. I cannot continue to be a victim or keep blaming my father for the type of people I'm bringing into my life. Yeah. So that's one way. I can say that maybe that, again, perhaps that is a sense of abandonment, whatever, leave the family, can't rely. Some level of unreliability was always what I was attracting. So given that, that's a classic. What are some other things that women experience when they've had issues with their father?
Well, they learn to abandon themselves. That's what you're saying. So yeah. The outer relationship becomes internalized. And unless you, as you so clearly described what happened to you, unless you go inside and figure out, wait a second, how have I internalized this outer and how am I treating myself the exact same way? as you do that, you're able to grow from it. So, there's a variety of effects from the absence. People lose their confidence. People become overly involved in developing. So they try to jump over the problem, kind of like you did. They try to deny. They'll keep on finding similar partners, or they will raise their children in the exact same way that they swore they never would because of that father. So what happens?
I've seen that, by the way. That's always tough because it's hard to look at the person who grew up that way, being in that situation, and look at them and go, how do you hated what you went through, but yet you're doing it to your child?
Right. Because we tend to treat ourselves and our children the way we were treated, unless we figure out what is the deal. And sometimes people avoid it because it's quite painful, as you said. It's not cheerful necessarily. However, it is so growth producing to go through the process. I would also like to add that, because you asked me, what are the effects? Well, many, but I have found that there's a huge variety of effects depending on the person, depending on the father's relationship to the mother, right, which you kind of hinted at, because that then models for the daughter what she should expect and how she should expect to be treated. And I think that this goes across all lines: ethnic, economic, cultural. You see that absence in almost every single one of those categories. How one identifies gender-wise, how one is, no matter what they do at their work. There's a similar something when there has been an absent father. I'll give you an example. A woman contacted me from England, so a whole different culture, a woman of color, and a woman who had no, she had no father in her life and lived on a block where nobody had a father. So what did she miss? And what was she doing? She was making a documentary on daughters who don't have fathers. So she was using the material in a very positive way, but she also was from a very different culture than myself, a different background, etc. And yet there was a similar knowing of this is an issue.
I would love to hear some other 180 turnarounds, people you've worked with who were trapped in something for years, a pattern related to this, and then were able to move out of it and what their life is like now.
You know what has happened is that they become creative. So they might become creative in having a different kind of relationship. They become creative with themselves, and they develop what they thought they could not develop. It's a very, people don't talk so much about creativity out of absence or pain, but that is really what can happen. As you say, a 180, it's not unusual. Again, it takes the work, but people become creative. They start to enjoy living. They start to feel joy about themselves. They stop mistreating themselves with food, alcohol, obsessions, having their faces done, how their body is. And one other thing. That's the other thing that happens. How you treat your body. And how you learn from your father to treat your body or not. Body image. So
how is that related? Give me some examples of how one might, because I don't see that in my own life, but how is that related, an eating with the body image?
Well, it is not unusual that when the daughter is around 12 or 13, the father is a little bit, if he's an unconscious father, okay, a checked out father, He is uncomfortable usually with her blossoming
Mm-hmm.
of her being and starts to make, because of the discomfort, pushes her away, makes very offensive comments about the length of the tightness of her pants, the way she looks, on
Gotcha.
and on. And what the daughter internalizes is, I should hide my body. I
Mm-hmm.
should be more sexual. So you can go many different ways.
Right.
I'm not all right. And that body image, I'm not all right, can manifest in a million different ways with
Yeah.
overeating, undereating, overexercise, underexercise. In other words, the balance of oneself is off balance because the father did not know how to mirror back the beauty of the daughter.
Hmm.
Mm.
That's juicy stuff.
It is.
How has being a Jungian psychologist transformed your life? How has it helped you? Are you open to sharing any personal stories of your own, where you've been able to, where you're like, gosh, thank God I'm a psychologist because I got through this quicker, something like that.
Well, let me bust the bubble on that. That one doesn't necessarily get through things quicker because you know how to work with people. It is always because people are always interesting, always a challenge, always bringing up something different, never the same. 2 sessions are never, ever the same. So there's a constant change, challenge, meeting of it, questioning, growth, encouragement to push the envelope, be who one is. The whole process of being an analyst means not to find peace necessarily, but it is to find an internal joy and a meeting with yourself in a very deep way so that the superficial, although it is there in our life, is not enough. What is always needed is the beauty of going more into it and finding out what is the meaning of this and why is it in my life. So I think that being an analyst has been a continual growth producing piece for me. And I mean, I've done it for my entire life. So it's satisfied my yearning for finding answers and why.
What was it that sparked your interest in becoming a psychologist?
Well, oh my, my story in some way is not unusual in that most people that I know who are analysts or psychologists, therapists, they've usually had maybe that role in their life, in their family, or they have a lot of questions that have gone unanswered. They have a state, either they were born with or developed a certain depth, a needing to know, like a push. I need to know. And oftentimes they didn't come from the most satisfying backgrounds. It's not that they were terrible. It's just that they could pick up the cracks in the environment. And oftentimes they're people who are very sensitive to other people's feelings. So they pick them up easily. It disturbs them. And the automatic feeling is, how could I correct this for myself and for these other people too? It's not uncommon, that kind of desire for betterness, you could say.
Yeah. I want to chat with you about a couple of terms that have been thrown around in our society a lot in the past couple of years. I've interviewed people on these topics before. I find them fascinating when we run into Well, I'd like to touch on narcissists
Oh,
first of all. And
right,
I know you wrote you wrote an article. There's many great articles on your website. Um,
right.
I,
Huh.
I guess okay. We can get into what narcissism is and the characteristics, how you spot it, and all of that. But in my experience with being exposed to them, I can't imagine in my head a world where a narcissist could ever recognize that they're a narcissist. Is that even possible?
Well, I do have a chapter in that book on the absent father, on narcissism. And part of, if you read the myth, the Greek myth of Narcissus, it's very interesting, and that he doesn't see anybody else. He's
Hmm.
very singular. And that to me is what is completely difficult for the narcissist as well. I would say that some of them, because it's a defense against being hurt by the world, they're quite sensitive people, although they are just take center stage and can be completely obnoxious. But there are narcissists who you can deal with, and they can come out of their narcissism, be aware of it, and be able to relate. The hardest thing for the narcissist is to be real and to relate and to be seen intimately. And that's why they're so hard to deal with, because you can see the outside and you want to get close, but there are lots of walls.
Hmm.
And they're not so easy to deal with. However, once they start to feel safe enough, the narcissist can really learn to be more open. There's so much negative press on narcissists, and I find them not really difficult, but it takes time. Anything good takes time. So it takes time for them to become comfortable. And also, first of all, to get into any kind of therapy or analysis because they're scared. It's
Yeah,
fear underneath.
absolutely. And I would say the same would be true for, just this one thing we call gaslighting, which another thing that's come up a lot.
Yeah.
Um, gaslighting is freaking crazy to me because I've been on the end of it, and it it kills me
Yeah.
as a human in this world because I don't like for example, I remember once being with some guys and like we're on a boat, and one of the guys like hid the other guy's wallet, and the guy was freaking out about the wallet for like 10 minutes. My gosh, we're in the
Yeah.
middle of a foreign country on a boat, like, and the other guy just let him, like, loved watching him freak out, and then was like, just kidding, here's your wallet. Right now, look, like 14-year-olds act that way, and I get it. But that to me, like that mean-spirited humor, it's like, how can someone think that that's funny watching someone suffer and freak out like that? That makes me so sick and creeped out. So
Yeah.
gaslighting to me is very gruesome in a lot of ways. And it's crazy to me to think that someone is calculating in their head trying to make you feel crazy, like, intentionally moving something or saying you said something when you didn't, all that kind of stuff. So we know what, I think most people listening know what gaslighting is. You can tell us in general, like, what it is, but then also like what is behind that of someone wanting to do that? Is that a control thing? Is that trying to control a person? We know it's all based in fear and insecurity and that kind of stuff, but I'd love you to touch just any way that you'd like to on that notion of gaslighting, because also as a nation, we've been gaslit by lots of people in our government, and not just one or two people. There's been just lots of gaslighting out there, and it's horrendous.
It is. I agree with you. It's very mean spirited. But I'll give you an example of a daughter and a father, where the father tells the daughter, you're not really pretty. You're not pretty. So you can do sports. Oh, that's like gaslighting. Or you're not really very good at this. So I really feel you're not going to make it. Really putting the daughter down very seriously. Don't think you can do it. That's not an unusual thing to say. And part of it is the envy of the father to the daughter, because the father unconsciously knows that the daughter is perhaps better than he is. By better, I mean more adept at something.
Sure.
The example that you're giving, I think the mean guy, was probably envious of the other one and insecure. And he tried to cut the other one down and make him feel badly, just like that father did to the daughter.
It's like a bully move. It's a bully.
Yeah. And could not tolerate if the daughter would go beyond the father. And so many terrible stories of, just even a father who will look at the daughter when she's 13 or 14 and comment on her body in the swimsuit. Now, how is she going to manage that? She's only 13 or so.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, it makes her want to hide because she feels attacked. She doesn't know what to do. The father is a bully, just like you said. And that is also an absent father. It's absent of love. And in your example, it's absence of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a relationship. That's what I was meaning also about narcissus and narcissism. You can't relate to somebody like that. And in that situation, where do you develop trust? So that's one of the things that also happens with daughters of absent fathers or bullying fathers or narcissistic fathers. How do you find trust? It's basic. It's basic to life, to relationships with others, and with yourself. So
much good stuff. I know you still work with people. Do you work with people remotely or only in the area in which you live?
No, I like almost every single person that I know works with people all over the place. I mean, different countries, different time zones, and most people are, because of COVID, are Zoom, and now we're kind of post-COVID, kind of a hybrid. Some people want to come in person, and some people are fine by Zoom, because that's what we've been doing. Our entire world has changed.
Yep. We'll put everything in the show notes. I just want to mention right now, SusanSchwartzPhD.com is her website to reach out and benefit from her book and all of her other work. What would you like to leave our audience with? I guess I would say perhaps along the lines of encouraging introspection and self-improvement, whether it's a psychologist or not.
Well, I actually appreciate the way that you said it, because to use introspection, to use self-reflection, to honor your issues and your problems, and be able to realize that they can be answered. One doesn't have to feel shame or badly about it, and to really have the self something to be able to find yourself. It's like a little spark inside that says, I have to do this. It's very important. And it really is, not only for yourself, but as you said as well, for our whole culture, so that we turn around the absence and turn it into presence.
That's so great. Thank you so much for all of your work and for spending your time enlightening our audience today. For everyone else, we'll see you next week. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you very much.
Hey, listeners. Over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/LRUS for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.